I need a nice drink. I'm gonna grab myself a Red Bull quickly. I'll be back in a second. Hello. Good afternoon.
We are not yet on stream.
Okay.
Hola a todos, aquí tenéis, de nuevo volvemos con las entrevistas, esta vez con Peter Dan, head coach de Team Heretics LEC. Me hace mucha ilusión hacer esta entrevista, la verdad, porque es la primera persona que traemos del staff técnico de LoL, bueno, después de Rob. Así que nada, la entrevista va a ser full en inglés. Si queréis hacer alguna pregunta en el chat, que sea full en inglés, ¿vale? Y ya está, vamos a empezar con la entrevista. Okay, hello Peter. Thank you very much for coming. It's just a pleasure to talk with you with such a experienced and person in esports, and also head coach of now Team Heretics. So just to tell you, you are very welcome here, and we are excited to talk with you. For beginning, I always do the same in the interviews. I want you to introduce yourself, your career, what teams you've been, and what can you tell us about you?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I come from I've been involved in League of Legends for 12 years now. Holy moly!
Wow.
Like, for a long time now. I started my career in China, doing analyst work for a number of different teams, IG, and some other smaller teams. Noah's Ark, who I don't think people have heard of. A little bit of work for. It wasn't called RNG back in the day. It was called Row Club. And then I worked. Then I kind of, when I left China, I was in China for my studies and my work. I came back to Europe to do my PhD. I took a little bit of a break from esports, but then I started working full time in Brazil after a couple of years off for INTZ. 2 years at INTZ. I don't know if fans would know about it, but it's the INTZ that went to Worlds and they beat EDG and then lost all their remaining games. That era of INTZ. Then I came back to Europe. I was 3 years in Splice, and then Mad Lions when franchising happened. But essentially the same org. And then I've been in North America for 2 years on Evil Geniuses. And now I'm back in Europe working with Heretics. It's been a long journey.
Yeah,
Real.
really long.
Yep. So that's my history.
Okay. Second question, I always do to coaches. I also talk to Neil. I don't know if you know Neil from Valorant team. We have him here as well. How do you define yourself as a coach? What do you think are your strengths, and what do you think are better doing?
Okay, I think that's an interesting question. Okay, so for me as a coach, I think I have three basic styles. So I come from a sports coaching background. Basically, I didn't do academic studies. My major is in politics and history. History undergraduate, politics PhD, and postgraduate. But in my spare time, I have a lot of interest in sports coaching. You know, I'm a qualified football coach, qualified netball coach. And so a lot of my approach towards coaching players is like that. My approach towards gaming, actually, I'm very old. I'm almost 36, which is a dinosaur in League of Legends years, I can tell you. Maybe. But back in the day, I was a pro Magic player for like several years when I was at school. Pro, it's not like we got paid salaries, but we got stipends for going to events, and we got like you win prize money and things like this. And I won a decent amount, not like I wasn't one of the top 10 players in the world, but I was one of the people who was up there and would get. So my approach towards games, and I used to play chess and things like this. So my approach towards League of Legends itself is trying to break it down into strategic parts, trying to almost treat it a bit like a strategic game or like a board game and things like this. So this is my approach towards kind of learning the game. And I'd say that I'm more of a mediator as a coach. Like my favorite type, I really like to work with players who, for lack of a better word, the community kind of rules out as being, if you apologize for the language, kind of shit. I like working
don't worry.
who have very strong opinions, who like to argue back. I like to learn things through discussion. I like to learn things through argument. The type of players I really, really love to work with are the type of players who will tell me as a coach, you're wrong and you're, like for all of these reasons, and you should do your research better, right? Or something like this.
Yeah.
So I would say that's kind of a little bit about my background as coaching. Yeah.
There are actually many people that say that the best players are the one that actually are able of they have their opinion, because that's the way to get better a lot of the time, like defending your opinion and trying to show you're right or you're wrong, and accepting when you're wrong too, of course. But so that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways that it can go there, right? Like if you have very, very like we call it toxic in the community, but it's not. If you have very strongly opinionated players, it can go in one of two ways. It can go down the path where you are like everything's about you, you're always right, you only care about yourself, you only think about yourself, right? And those players are really, really hard to work with. But I can give an example of a player. I had Inspired for 1 year in North America, and he was the type of player, he had very, very strong opinions, right? Like the number of times he's told me that I'm like clueless about something it's not as high as humanoid, but it's pretty high. But he would do everything to look after his teammates. He would we had 2 rookies on the team, and maybe he would either look after them directly, or if there was something which he was too is shy the word I'm looking for. If he was too he didn't want to do himself, he would come to the coaching staff or come to the performance staff and say, this guy's feeling a little bit rough today. Is there anything you guys can do, right? And it's because he wanted to win, but he also cared and realized that he couldn't win by himself. And those are the people that I really, really love to coach. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. Sky?
I'm curious, how do you share your duties as a head coach with Seal? Because it seems he's not only an analyst, but in many ways he also works as almost a second coach with you. So how do you share your workload with him?
Oh, okay. So I think it's worth talking a little bit about my coaching system. So basically, the way that I like to coach is I like to have a 3-coach system. And I like to do a lot of one-to-one focus in coaching. So basically, I think normally the kind of default thing that people use in League of Legends, if you have like a head coach and a strategic coach, right? The head coach leads the review, strategic coach, or assistant coach gives feedback. But I think that's not how we do things on Heretics, and it's not how I've done things on any other previous teams. Well, not since Brazil. Basically, the way the 3-coach system works is you have an A coach, B coach, a C coach. The way that let's talk about review, right? So normally a review is like 25 minutes, and you review the game and you talk about the game chronologically and things like this. Normally, when I'm coaching a team, we'll cover the game in really, really light detail. We won't cover the entire game. We'll have maybe 15 minutes, which is done which is just focusing on maybe 3 or 4 points, and like most of the game we just won't even cover it in the review. But then we'll have like 10 minutes set aside for 1-to-1 time or 1-to-2 time if it's bot lane, because you work with bot lane as a duo. And then all the coaches will split up and do individual spot coaching. So that means sometimes there's an expectation from every coach I have within my staff that they can position coach a position at LEC level. They don't have to be able to position coach every single position, but they have to be able to position coach at LEC level. And sometimes this means that responsibilities are fluid, right? So let's call it coach A, coach B, coach C. So coach A leads the review, coach B is the person who will support, but coach C is the one who will have the most work in 1-to-1. So there's sometimes, for instance, where Seal will lead review and I'll be mainly focused. So I'm working with Evie this split.
Yeah.
I was working a bit with Yankos and Ruby last split, but basically the responsibility is very fluid. I would say I lead maybe 60% of the reviews, 70% of the reviews. I'd say Seal leads maybe 20%, maybe Samex leads about 10%. But there's an expectation you can do all 3 roles. And I would say Seal does a huge amount of 1-to-1 work. He does a huge amount of presentation work, scouting work, and he does a lot of draft prep and things like this. So it's kind of a shared responsibility across the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I have a small personal, not personal, but a small question, which is, there is almost a joke with you about the fact that you watch a lot of small leagues, and then some unknown player will come out and you will be like, yeah, I've been watching him since he was in 2nd division in Vietnam, and he's very good. I could see it. Do you agree with that joke? Do you think that's true, or is that more of a narrative around you?
I do watch a lot of League, but I will say that it's been difficult. So basically, when I made the shift to North America, normally I have like a network of people that I will ask to advise. Okay, so the leagues that I watch every single CBLOL game, every single VCS game, every single LPL game, and every single LEC game. Okay, so those are the 4 leagues that I watch 100%. Notice there's no LCK there, but we'll talk about that in a second. Then I will pick maybe 4 minor leagues, and I will just watch those. And when I say minor league, it means that I won't watch every game. I'll watch like the top teams, and I'll try to do like more. I'll try to like study a bit more. But when I moved to North America, and normally I'll get advice. So I wanted to learn about the Polish league back in the day. So I went and asked some of the casters, which are some teams I should focus on, which are some narratives I should focus on. But when I went to NA, it was really hard to get good advice for collegiate and academy to watch. NA like minor leagues. So I had to do a lot more of my focus on NA than I would normally do. But now I'm back in Europe. It kind of meant that in summer 2022 I was a bit behind. But now being back in Europe, it means that I can watch all of these leagues again. And obviously I watch every single LVP game. I watch like all the LFL games. But it's been good to come back and have time to watch Italy, NLC, Poland again. So that kind of thing is beneficial. But I would say that this is not like how would I say it? This is not some necessarily something to be proud of. It's because I don't play League of Legends. I haven't played League for 8 years, 9 years. I can't learn like many of the top coaches. Let's say a Vega V2, who's like he's ranked 180 in solo queue, right?
Yes,
On the ladder right now. They play the game. They learn the game through doing from what they see in their like masters level games or GM games or diamond games, right? I can't do that because I can't play the game. Like when I was growing up, like esports and like competitive community gaming, I never had access to that, right? So I'm really bad at League. But how can I coach an LEC team? I have to study. I study like a huge amount. I get the first person perspectives because we have access to all the first person perspectives in the world, right? Like except LPL, but I can get those through. It's possible to get those. But basically, I will study like Syndra versus LeBlanc. Let's give an example. I will study Syndra versus LeBlanc from both sides with the camera for one side on, so you can see their first-person perspective, and I will study 50 games of the matchup. Maybe like 10 games of Rookie, 10 games of Trophy, 10 games of Faker. I just name people. And then the way that I learn is I will break down the difference between how Trophy plays a matchup versus how Faker plays a matchup. And this is this means that it takes me a huge amount of time to switch position coaching to a new role. But it means that that's kind of my approach. When I'm coaching a player, like if I'm coaching Yankos, what am I going to teach Yankos about jungling? It's like what you teach Roger Federer as his tennis coach. You don't like teach him new things. You show him these are some approaches that like some top players have had. Actually, let's do mid lane because mid lane was my most recent position. Like, this is how Chovy plays a matchup. This is how Faker plays a matchup. I prefer how Chovy plays the matchup because he does these things slightly differently. But, let's have a discussion over all of these styles and tell me which one you like best. And let's have a discussion. And I would say that's how I coach. And that's why I have to watch so many games, right? Because I'm watching games when most other people would be playing, I think is the difference.
When you say first-person perspective, it means from as if you were playing. I understand.
Yes, but obviously ProView doesn't exist anymore. But I think most pro teams, we have access to, we can watch the game in client. So I would watch the game in client with just the vision from one team. So I can't see exactly where they're clicking, but I can see their movements. I can see, like, let me give an example. So like there's a player on OMG called Cream, okay? And when he plays Ari in team fights, the way that he throws his skill shot is he doesn't throw his skill shot how would I describe it? So he throws his skill shot 50-50, so when he's aiming his skill shot, he doesn't throw his skill shot at the model of the enemy champion. He throws it so that 50% of his Q will hit the model. So he's trying to get the person to dodge in a certain direction by throwing a skill shot in a certain direction, right? Whereas a mid laner like Chovy normally throws his skill shot at like 75%, right? So it's so he's aiming more for the hit rather than what his skill shot will force the enemy person to do to dodge, right? And these are the things that you can only really pick up through looking at the first person and at the first person perspectives. And yeah, I would say that's kind of how I study the game, right? Like I'm trying all the time when I look at them, and we kind of look at them in client. So it's not perfect, but it's you can see how they'll play based on vision, and you can see the pings and things like that.
Yeah, and very small thing. Do you know Ayu, the Brazilian player?
Yes, I do know Ayu, the Brazilian player. Yes.
I want to know your opinion on the chance of him going to a major league or staying in Brazil. What do you think will happen with him, or what's your opinion? Very small.
That's a fun question. He's good enough. If he goes too early, it will be awful for his career. That's what I would say. I think that you have to spend some of your time developing early on in your career, and you see this sometimes with football players. They'll come from Brazil and they'll go to Europe early on in their career, and you need your fundamental base to be there. I think he has the talent. We scrimmed against Furia. It was our first day of scrims, so they put up some good results. I would say this Heretics team is actually a pretty good scrim team. So I think it was 50-50. It was like their last day before they went back to Brazil. It was our first day. But he was very, very impressive. And I would say that it was, considering he hadn't played AD carry for a full year, because he was an AD carry when he came up, then he switched to support, and then he just switched back to AD carry. The thing which was impressive about him in solo queue is how consistent he was. He would just never make mistakes. I've seen more aggressive AD carries, but he is. I would say that he's definitely one of those guys who can make the switch later. But I'm sure that in Brazil, he's just started out his career, and I'm sure that he's got a good year and a half left on Furia, maybe 2.5 years before he'll think about that move. But yeah, definitely has the talent. He always got 2,000 LP on the EU ladder, which is no joke. So yeah, very impressive player for sure. His Belveth support is absolutely disgusting. He plays Belveth support. I was watching him in CBLOL. I thought they were trolling when he picked it the first time. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I didn't even know you could play it support, but
100% win rate.
but he played like 5 games and he has 80% win rate, right? It was 4 wins and 1 loss.
Has he lost any games? I don't think he's lost.
Okay, so he has 100% win rate. He has 4 wins for sure. I've definitely seen. He's an excellent player. Absolutely crazy player.
Okay, I have 2 more questions before moving on for the main topic, that it's obviously your work in Team Heretics. I have 1 question from. I want to know the difference between NA environment and Europe one, because every time it's said, right, that NA is less professional, or players are not the same as professional as Europe. And also about if it's true that there's more money in NA than Europe. That's about the both questions I want to know.
Okay. How should I answer this question? So, what's the difference between NA and EU? I could talk for 3 hours on this topic, so I'm going to try to make it as brief as I can. So, is there more money? Let's start with the money thing.
Okay, let's go.
It seems like there isn't anymore, but there used to be back in the day. I would say that more for players than coaches. I'd say that players used to be able to get 5 or 6 times more. Coaches is about the same. That's all I'd say for that. In terms of, but I don't think it's like that anymore, given what I've seen recently.
Yeah.
In terms of what the differences are in the environment, holy moly.
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing I would say is that it is very hard if you are a coach in NA to improve. There is no system like in Europe. You know who the good coaches are. Like the coaches that are coming up, like you can see there's such a huge amount of work behind them that you can see how good this coach is, right? Like you've seen them, maybe they've competed in the Portuguese league. Let's look at Crusher. Crusher, a perfect example, the Fnatic coach, right? Before he was Fnatic coach, he went through Portuguese league, he went through Spanish league, he then went to LEC, and then I don't really like what Fnatic did, where they gave him one mini split, which is like crazy. But you will see when I want to interview coaches in Europe, they have huge amounts of experience. I can talk to 10 different players that they've worked with. I can talk to 3 members of staff. I can get a good idea of who they are as a person. And when I'm interviewing them, I can talk to them about, what are the big mistakes you made in the career? What are your big learning points that you had? What did you, tell me about an interesting strategy you tried in a particular team, and whether it worked or whether it didn't, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to learn. There's a lot of opportunity to develop, and there's many, many different leagues you can do it in with different levels of seniority, right? Like the things you can experiment on in say the Balkan League are different to your expectations as a coach in France or Spain, right? Like France and Spain, it's basically LEC, just LEC light, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in NA they just don't have this. Like in NA below, like there's no way for you to develop, because the only thing you can develop as is an academy coach. And the skill set you need to be a good academy coach is not the same skill set you need to be a good LCS coach. It's different in EU, because let's say Heretics LVP, sure, it's like an academy team, but Heretics want to win the Spanish league, right? They want to win EU Masters. So Naru's responsibility and Juventus' responsibility as coaches of our LVP team is to win. It's to develop players. Yes, developing is important, but it's primarily to win. And in NA, you never get that opportunity until you make it to LCS. So a lot of the skills that you need in a team environment, let's say your team has, I just use Evil Geniuses, right? Like it has Impact on it, it has Inspired on it, and it has Vulcan. How much do you think I, as a coach, am teaching Impact? How much am I making Impact better? It's maybe I'm making 5% better, maybe 10% better. How much is he making me better? Right? He's also making me better, right? It's a two-way thing when you're dealing with veterans. When you're dealing with rookies, you have more responsibility, right? But you don't develop that skill set. If all you're doing is an academy coach, right? As an academy coach, you have the responsibility to tell your players, you need, like, do what I say, right? And normally you're not getting better yourself. You're just passing your knowledge on to somebody else. And in a team where you're full of veterans, that's not how it works. It's very, very different. So I'd say the coaching is an issue. I'd say also the team environment. Let me put it this way. When EG in spring 2022 were coming up, we're like, we were the challenger, we weren't the champions. We would like grind for our lives. We had like 2 players who had the most Champions Queue games, Jojo and Impact. We'd have like players working super, super hard. We would grind scrims, we would play scrims as much as we possibly could. Then when we got to the top, the only team that would do that was TL and CLG, right? So I'm not going to call out individual teams, but there are certain top teams in North America. C9 weren't bad. They weren't as good as TL, but they weren't bad. But there are certain teams in North America, which you could probably piece together who I'm talking about, who were top teams, but basically just didn't give a shit in scripts. And the problem is in EU, let's say so Excel try hard in scripts, but let's just, as an example, let's just say Excel were not trying hard in scripts, right? If I don't want to scrim Excel, I just go scrim K-Corp, right? Or I go and scrim Heretics LVP, or I go and scrim anybody, we start right now, right? Like whoever, it doesn't matter, right? I always have the option to scrim another team. In NA, you can't do that because the academy teams, they're development teams. They're not there to win. So basically, you have 10 teams in the league, and maybe 3 teams of them they're actually trying to win, right? Or maybe some of the teams are trying really hard to win, but the skill gap is so large, right? So it's the responsibility of the top teams in the region to push each other, and sometimes you don't get that in NA, and it's a big problem in North America versus other regions, because in Europe, you just scrim the ERL teams. If you're in PCS, or you're in Japan, you go scrim Korea or China, right? Like if you are DFM, you don't need to scrim Japanese teams if you don't think they're good enough. You go scrim bottom LCK teams, or you scrim LCK Challenger, right? But in NA, you don't have that option, and it makes a huge, huge difference. So I would say that's the biggest, it's the practice environment, I would say. Because the options are limited, right? Sorry.
Okay, well, I have an opinion on this because there's now a debate, there's people saying that academy teams should only be for developing talent. And because, okay, I'm gonna explain you the full context because I wanna know your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
What we are discussing right now, that for example in the Spanish community is discussed right now, is that the importance of academy teams in the way to fit the main teams. Okay, mm-hmm. So there's an issue that there are many teams that they are using their academies just only for winning. Mm-hmm. I don't say it's the case of Heretics because it's not the structure we want to follow, but we also have a good team. So, but there's teams like Koi or Fnatic. Fnatic they did really well, but for example G2, that it was partnered with G2 Arctic, that is not from here, that they only had the academy for exposure, for have a Spanish fanbase there. Like they didn't give a shit about the academy. So my take is that there should be a developing team in a league before a league under the, for example, AVP or other, and then you should have 2 teams, for example in esport, in sports, in traditional sports, that you have I don't know how I'd say it in English, you have the guys that are learning and they go and they pay for learning and they're doing it for free, and then you have the second team that gives them the exposure to play, and then if they do well, they can just go up to the main team. What's your opinion on this? How do you think it would be the perfect structure for a team to develop talent and use it in a main team?
So you mean it's things like Atletico Madrid B, right? Or Real Madrid B?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, so let's talk about development. So the first thing is, if you have a team that is full of veteran players in EU, think about who you're developing. You're actually not developing the players as much, you're developing the coaches, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there is some kind of development which is going on there. Now, if you go and have a coach and he's just sitting there and then you let him go for free at the end of the year, then what did you really gain, right? You just gain the result. But having a team environment where you can, I talk to Naru once every week minimum. I talk to Jivus maybe 2 times every 3 weeks, maybe once a week, but I speak to Naru more than Jivus. But obviously, we're always discussing new ideas. We're always sharing new ideas. We're always I'm giving him books to read. I'm giving him matches to watch, right? And vice versa, right? So what I would say for that is you can develop both ways. In terms of the development in a second tier, so I think that it's not a bad idea. The problem is that there's so many ERLs in Europe. If you are a player in in Europe and you want to get to LEC, the best way you can advertise yourself is get to EU Masters. And the problem you would have with having a second tier league in that kind of a way is that team would not be able to promote to EU Masters, right? So let's say you are a Masters 500 LP player, right? And you think that you are good at, you're better than your rating is. The best thing you can do if you want to go to LEC is go to like, so I feel like I'm picking on the Balkan League, Czech League, right? Go to the Czech League, win the Czech League, and then go to EU Masters and show your stuff at EU Masters. And I think it would be very hard to recruit the top prospects to go and play in the second division if they, unless either you pay them, like, you know, I just give an example of Case, like I've heard that some of the wages that they pay are pretty good for like.
It's insane, bro.
But or you make sure that there's lots of viewership on you, or you make sure that like there has to be a trade-off that makes it worth it, because why not just go to Czech League and then make your way up straight to LVP? So as a coach, I would love that system to be in place. You know, I would love to work with, you know, let's say 15, 16-year-olds, they're coming up through the ladder, you know, it would be Spanish players because it's Heretics, you know, maybe they go and join like our youth, I don't know what you call it, like our youth system, our feeder system. They get coaching. We can see who's developing. But I think it would be really, really hard to get people to do it. But in a perfect world, obviously, I would love that system. They have that system in Korea. They have that system in China. But in Europe, I think it's really, really hard to do, because how are you going to convince that player that they should come up through you, when if they go to another league, they can qualify for EU Masters, and they like everyone is watching EU Masters. All the scouts are watching EU Masters, right? So that I think is the big problem. But obviously, I think that system would be really good, right, from the coaching side.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Heretics itself after talking about the league in general. So first of all, we are curious about when you left NA. Why did you go to Heretics? What did Heretics offer? How did that go?
Okay, so when I left NA, I wasn't sure that I was going to keep working in league. I can't go into detail, but basically, when I left NA, I kind of like hated the esports industry, like with a passion. And I was just like, do I really want to be part of this anymore? So I really, you know, my agent told me to put out a looking for team post, but honestly, I was happy to just retire. I was really like, I'm just done with this. I'm not doing this again. Now, Aranea reached out. He's somebody I know for a long time. He was on Mad Lights. And we spoke. Like he's somebody that I admire. I think he's probably the best scout that I've ever worked with. Maybe between him and Mac, like they're both really, really exceptional scouts. Empire as well on YouTube, but like you know, one of the best scouts, one of like a really good person, human being. And he reached out and said, "Would you like to do some work in this off season for Heretics? You know, just to help us build our roster." So I helped. Before joining Heretics, you know, I talked with them about some of the prospects they were looking to sign, and you know, this was more as like to gauge my interest, right? And when Heretics made an offer, it was interesting. I wasn't sure whether I was going to keep working in esports, but you know, the opportunity to work with Aranea and to work with an org like Heretics, who I understood the values that this org had and understood how they were going to behave understand that they were going to behave in an appropriate way, and in a respectful way is the way that I would say it, versus maybe some orgs that I've worked with in the past. And that's what convinced me to come and work for Heretics. So honestly, like there was a chance last season that I would just have retired. I would have just left this industry. But I would say that it was the fact that I could work with Aranea and the fact that I could work with Heretics, which kind of led me to consider continuing to coach. I think is how I would describe it. But yeah, I helped a bit. Like there were these bods that were leaked. I think Ulu leaked some of the people we had in our scouting combine, and I was there as one of the coaches in the scouting combine. But that was just me helping out for fun. I hadn't signed for Heretics yet at that point. I was just, you know, looking and helping with some of the scouting. So it was later on in the off season. But I've been in talks with Heretics about my opinions on players and things like this. I know, like for instance, our air will ask like a large number of people about certain prospects, and I think I was one of those people. So I think that's how I would describe Heretics. I think I formally joined Heretics like after the transfer window was open. But I definitely given my opinions on players, all the way back a long time before, even when Worlds was still ongoing.
That connects with my next question, which is, was the roster made already when you joined as head coach? Or how much input did you have? But I guess if you helped from the beginning, you had a lot of input.
Well, input. My opinion was noted, I would say, is the correct way to describe it. So the only thing I think is that Jack was already going to be there. But I think the other 4 players were definitely people that I'd given opinions on. And obviously when I joined, those were people that were interested. But I would say that Jankos was signed very, very late in the transfer window. So I would be clear that we had some options for jungle. But I would say that, and we had some options for top lane. But basically, I think that the only 2 people that were thought of early were kind of Jack and Ruby, which is ironic given the situation. Oh, and myself. I would say that those 3 were the people that were there early.
Yeah.
And when we had those 3 players signed, you have like a lot of rookie, like, okay, so Ruby is not a rookie, Mercer is not a rookie, but their experience in leadership positions is very, very limited. So we needed some kind of veteran leadership there, and that's why Evie was signed, right? Like Evie, I think, is a really good player, but Evie was signed primarily because of what he offers to a team environment, what he offers in terms of leadership. He is one of the best human beings you can possibly have outside of the game. And when you have a team that has multiple rookies, that's his primary responsibility. When we talk about Evie a bit later, maybe I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but basically we needed to find a veteran that we could fit into the team. And we were looking at rookie options for jungle. I don't want to say some of these names because, but we had like, so if you could think of top junglers in Europe, we were thinking about those guys, right? Including Blue Razor, right? And so we needed a veteran top laner, and that's why we chose Evie. And then obviously late in the transfer window, the option of Jankos became available. And that, I think, changed the trajectory of the team a lot, and it kind of changed how the team functioned a lot. And I think this is important because a team that has Evie and then let's just say Blue Razor, right? So let's say a team that is Evie, Blue Razor, Ruby, Jack, and Mercer. That's a team that has really low expectations, right? But it's a team that would have been a bit like SK, where you just go out, you play your game, you have a relaxed game, and you get the ability to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes without any pressure on. It's more. You have the option to learn through making mistakes. Okay, and I think signing Jankos kind of changed the trajectory of the team because when you have Jankos on your team, you have a responsibility to Jankos and to his legacy and to his ability to play within yourself, and it's a different type of environment. And like I'm not saying Jankos was a really perfect teammate. He was a good veteran leader. He was excellent in game, excellent in review, excellent in scrims. But there is no denying. Let's imagine from the perspective of Ruby, right? If Blue Razor is your juggler and you think Blue Razor is inting you, you just go and say to Blue Razor, "What the fuck are you doing? Come in on this wave." I want you on this wave now, and you're gonna gank him. But if Jankos is doing it, are you gonna say that to Jankos? Like if you're Jack and Jankos is going to Herald and there's a wave stacking into bot, are you going to say to Jankos, "No, you're wrong. Don't go to Herald. Come and cover me"? Like no matter what. I mean, it's really, really difficult. And I think this impacted Jack and Ruby a lot. And I think we didn't see the best out of it last split. And I will be clear that the games that Heretics won were basically the games where Jack and Ruby were playing on their comfort champions. When Ruby was playing on Ari, which is like his best champion coming up, he would just literally micromanage angles. He would just, it was like I was working with a different human being. Right? When he's on Azir, he's just like, I do everything for Jankos. When he's on Ari, he's like, we're doing this. I have priority on this wave. We're going to do this. When Jack is on Draven, he's like, you're coming bot. Like, I don't care about the other things. I want you bot on this wave. I want you to do this. And it was really, really noticeable. And I think this was the big thing which held Heretics back. I think that this meta, especially in spring, you look at who the top teams in the LEC were. They're the teams with the most vocal AD carries, right? And the most commanding AD carries. The two most vocal AD carries in the LEC are Crownshot and Crowny and Kazi. And Upset is definitely up there. I don't know Hansama that well in terms of what his comms are like, but I would say that the 3 of the top 4 teams had extremely vocal AD carries who made the game about them. And I think that in this kind of a meta, it was really, really hard for Jack. That's what I would say. So with this new lineup, we brought in players who are more willing to use Jankos to the best of his abilities, and this is kind of why we chose to make the swaps that we have. I want to be clear, like, I don't think Ruby is a bad player. I don't think Jack is a bad player. But for Ruby, I think that he really, really struggled to command Jankos in the way that you need to as a mid laner in this meta. And I think for Jack, he even in LVP, he's not the most vocal AD carry. And, it was a case that we still think Jack has a lot of potential for the future. But there's no time, like the summer split. If Heretics do badly in summer split, our summer split could be over in 3 weeks. And what will we have learned in 3 weeks for Jack's development, right? So this is why the decision was made with Jack. I would say with Jack, we still believe in his future because that's why he's still on Heretics, right? Instead of on a different LVP or LFL team. But he needs to develop those skills, I would say.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, Sky, if you wanna go deep in the team, well, I have one question right now before asking for more deep content, because I'm not from League of Legends. I mean, I'm not very, 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 very good on League of Legends as Sky is, because Sky is all the time watching League of Legends. I've been watching it for 2 years. I come from Valorant, so this is a new world for me. So I'm asking, how did you manage the pressure in the team? Like, I'm gonna be honest. When we presented the roster, Arani, I said it was a long-term roster. Like, they were gonna be split by split improving. Okay, it was the main idea. Okay, so when the first when the first split ended, I think you were kind of happy with the results. Like, happy, no, that obviously you're not gonna be happy when you fail in groups, but it was decent, right, for the work. How did you manage the second split that you had to improve the last results?
Okay, so actually I can talk about this. So we got very, very unlucky in Winter Split. I will be clear, like, in Winter Split, in the Vitality series, 2 of our players were sick. And then before the SK series, Ruby got COVID. So nobody's playing from the office. We have 1 player who's very sick in the Vitality series, and 3 players who are very sick in the SK series. And that felt so bad on stage. Because as a team, we were playing pretty well in scrims. We were improving every week. And then the end of the season happened, the end of the best of ones, and then everyone got sick. And the worst thing is the COVID sickness meant that there was a 3 week gap, I think 2 week gap between the Winter Split and Spring Split, and we basically couldn't scrim. So we came into Spring Split with like almost no scrims, like no proper scrims, and obviously Ruby was still remote because he had COVID. And we come into the Spring Split, and we're behind the curve. We go 0-3 in the first week. We almost turn it around, but basically, it was rough. It was really, really rough. And the problem is that now this puts us in a position with the new LEC format where no development can happen, right? If we have another bad split, Heretics are not going to be playing any more games. We have 3 weeks of games, and then everyone is gone, right? Like, I mean, I'll probably go to Madrid if that happens, and help the LVP team. But the thing is that there's no chance. There's no more time for development. We have no chance for development. And if you look at a player like Jack, I feel really, really bad for Jack because Jack is somebody who's a rookie. He was supposed to be given the entire chance to develop. He didn't. His progress was good in winter. He has literally, because of illness, the team is in a really bad position in spring, and now he's behind the curve. So Jack and XKick, two rookies coming in at the same time, right? I think Jack was developing really, really well, but XKick is now an entire split ahead of him. And if SK do badly next in summer, there's still a chance they're going to be in the championship game. In the old Riot system, you would have a minimum of 9 weeks, right, of season where you could go and improve, right? So you look at Mad Lions in 2020 when we had 4 rookies coming up. Summer split was just like 9 weeks. You would have a minimum of 9 weeks plus playoffs. The new system means that you have 3 weeks and then you're done. And there's no way you could develop. Like, there's no way that there's no chance for development in this new system unless your winter and spring were good. And that's why that makes things very, very difficult. And that's, like, to be clear, like, again, I'm just going to keep using Jack. Jack, every week, Samuks, who's on our LEC coaching staff, and Seal, Chris, go and talk to him, right? Like, they give him feedback on his LVP games, they give him feedback on his scrims, and it's the same for other players in the LVP team, right? But it's not like we're ignoring him. It's not like you're back in Madrid, we don't care about you anymore. But there's no chance for development, right? Like, there's literally 3 weeks, so we have to go out there and we have to win as soon as we possibly can. That's what I would say.
That makes sense. And I'm curious now, talking about the team itself when competing. We saw a lot of games where you had an okay early game, even got some big advantages in the first split and all, but then it always seemed to fall apart in the mid game, particularly. In team fights, there seemed to be a lot of trouble with communication, with coordination, Evie entering alone, engaging when the team was disengaging, things like that. What went wrong? Why was that happening, in your opinion?
So I think I've touched on this before, but basically, it was very hard, I think, for anyone except Jankos to make, like, Mercer a little bit sometimes, right? But Mercer is a moderately quiet person, not super quiet, but moderately, to make calls for when we wanted to fight. And I think that this was a Heretics issue. This wasn't like a Jack or a Ruby issue, because I have voice comms from Jack from when he was playing in LVP. I have voice comms from Ruby from when he was playing in China, from when he was playing in Unicorn Sexy Edition in Prime League.
Yeah.
And they were completely different. Like, the way that they're communicating, the way that they would micromanage people to set up for team fights and things like this were completely different. And what would happen is that our 2 most vocal people on the team would be Jankos, which, okay, he's obviously fantastic, and Evie, who couldn't really communicate fully in English. And we weren't getting, like, that kind of response from our main carries, because normally the carries are the people who call how you want to team fight, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't have that, and I'm still not sure why that was. I think, like, again, I'll say this again, I think if we had Blu-rays in our team, Jack and Ruby would have looked a lot better. But let's be clear, I'm really glad we have Jankos on, like, I think Jankos is the best juggler in Europe. But I think if we have Jankos, we should build a team, because, again, Jankos was literally signed right at the end of the transfer window, right? So we didn't plan to build this team with Jankos, but now that we have Jankos, we should put a team around him that can play with him. And I don't mean, like, stylistically, I mean play with him, like, in terms of communication, in terms of how they play the game. And when I go and watch scrims right now with Flackhead, like, Flackhead doesn't give a shit, right? Like, if Jankos does something bad, he'll but he will just, like, flame into nothing. It's really, really funny to hear them joke being comps. And obviously Vincent he's been MVP of the league, right? He was MVP in spring 2022, right? So obviously he respects Jankos, but if we go into review and he thinks that Jankos has done something that he doesn't like, he's willing to tell him. And I think this makes Jankos happier as well, because it's good for his own improvement, right? So I think that this combination now, when I watch this Heretics team in scrims, they're really good. Like, they're not, like, I mean, it's a lot of the problems, a lot of the problems which maybe you saw with Heretics team fighting and Heretics mid-game macro don't happen anymore. And why don't they happen? It's because Flackett has some of the best voice comms I've ever heard for team fighting for an AD carry. His team, he will tell you 60 seconds in advance how the team fight is going to play out, and he will micromanage. Like if he thinks Evie is too far up, he will just tell Evie, "I need you to cover me on this, right? Or I need you to tank this ability," and he will just he will communicate. And it's been, as a result, the team is playing much better as a whole. And I think this is, and for the mid game rotations, Evie's English obviously a lot better now than it used to be. He's almost fluent now. I think the pop quiz, the LEC pop quizzes will come out, and he's fluent in English. Basically, you'll see that now. And Vincent is he's not as vocal as Flackett, but he has a stronger voice, and it means that now we are much better at playing like the 1-3-1, simply because we have two solo laners who can talk with each other about how they want to play the game. I think is the important thing.
I'm curious because you said in the team during spring, shot calling was done mainly by Jankos and then by Evie. Right now, how is that the dynamic? Has that changed? Or
I'd say so. It depends what we're shot calling for, right? So if we're playing a 1-3-1 comp, it's different if we're playing a team fighting comp. But if we're playing like a team fighting comp, I would say Flackett is the most vocal, Jankos is number 2, Mercer number 3. If we're playing a 1-3-1 comp, I'd say Jankos, then VTO, then Flackett. And as a result, for instance, with Evie, because now he knows what his role is and he knows his responsibility, he doesn't feel pressured to try to shot call for the team anymore, and he's just focusing on playing his own game. And as a result, he looks much better. Like Evie in scrims now compared to spring is like twice the player he was. And that's because he could just focus on himself and just rely on his team to tell him when he's needed. I think one thing that Heretics really struggled with, for instance, was TP usage. Like sometimes we would just TP in and then a fight would not happen, or we would TP too early, or we would TP too late. And that I think is very, very different on this current team, I would say.
I find that very interesting because Flackett has had a fame of being a very silent player and not talking enough in games. So that means he has changed for the better in that sense. That's good to hear.
I mean, I'll be honest, I literally couldn't believe the Flackett that we saw in bootcamp. Like, I coached him before. He was on Mad Lions when I was in 2020 back in the day. He was quite quiet, but he is he's a monster. He's like, I don't understand where it came from, because he was vocal in the LVP team, but he was never vocal like this. Like, I mean, he is just he's willing to micromanage like 4 players, and like he will shot call like the wave. He will shot call like what he wants his tanks to do. He's doing a huge amount. And I think maybe I've got one thing to maybe explain the Flackett situation. So I think Flackett learned a lot when he was in LVP through working with Marlon, because I think he was always the rookie on the team in G2 and on Mad Lions when he was coming up. But on the LVP team, he had to take responsibility. And I think the best example I can give for this is Marlon. So obviously, Heretics had the 0-3 series where they lost to Movistar Riders in the LVP finals. And what happened in that series is Marlon had a really rough series, right? Like his first game was pretty bad, and like it kind of he just had a really bad series. I think it was the first time he played on stage. It was really, really rough. And obviously everyone was feeling pretty sad after that. And Flackett went to him and he was like, it doesn't matter. Let's spend the next couple of weeks going over some things together. And he like put his arm around him as a veteran. He looked after him. He made sure he was good. And you saw this at EU Masters, because Marlon had a pretty rough game against Gamers Origin. His first game was not good. But then Flackett talked to him, and then he smurfed the rest of the series, right? Like Marlon was the MVP of the win against Gamers Origin, right? Like we won the series against probably the favorites to win EU Masters, and Marlon in games 2 to 5 was completely smurfing out of his mind. He was hitting like every single hook. He was he was everywhere on the map, and I put a lot of that. Okay, obviously Marlon, great player, on himself, but also I put a lot of that on Flackett. because Flackett looked after him after the LVP finals when he didn't let him like suffer alone. He didn't let him feel blamed by the team. He didn't let him like, be by himself. And when the same thing happened in the EU Masters quarterfinals, he was there to make sure to say, look, I believe in you, just win, right? Like just do it. And that to me shows a lot of character, right? Because imagine you're Flackett, you've been on G2, you've gone to Worlds, you've gone to like MSI semifinals, and you're now in LVP playing with a rookie, and you do everything in your power to make sure that rookie becomes a better version of themselves. And to me, when I heard that, what happened after LVP finals, I was like, yeah, okay, like Flackett is going to be like, he's grown up, right? Like he is now a veteran, and I was very, very impressed with that. And leaving aside his gameplay, which is good, his gameplay is really, really good. It's going to be a top 3 AD carry in the league right from the start, because I've seen the scrims. Like our bot lane 2v2 is, we haven't scrimmed every team, but of the teams we've scrimmed, we have the best 2v2 of any team, but we haven't scrimmed Vitality, SK, and Astrals, right? Because we play them. But it's what he adds outside the game, and it's what he adds in shot calling that is making this Heretics team better. And I would say he's one of the key pieces that is going to define how Heretics do the split, and he's already there. I think it's very, very impressive. It's even better than what I expected, to be honest.
I can tell you there are some people opening bottles throughout Spain after hitting that, celebrating.
We're gonna win LEC, bro. I'm in the boat more than ever, man. I mean, I'm I'm hyped as fuck, man, right now. So what? Okay, I wanna go deep into. We talk about the team, about the everything that happened. I think it was very clear. I wanna talk more about the org. I wanna know do you see a bright future in Heretics on how they work, how the way they function, like everything you're seeing in the team. Do you think we're following the right way, or do you think we can improve some things?
So here's what I would say about Heretics. Firstly, I would say that I've worked on. Okay, I'm going to ignore China for now because I wasn't full time, but I've worked on 1, 2, 3, 4. I've worked on 5 teams now. For how things are run behind the scenes. I would say Heretics content people are light years better than any other team that I've worked on. I would say that I stepped in for our first content day, and it is. I can't stress, like it's like a completely different world. You feel like you're going from from like school level football, like high school level football, into like Barcelona, right? Like this is literally what it feels like. And in terms of how the org treats the teams and how, so as a head coach, I have to give feedback to senior management, how the team is going, right? And I have to explain why we're making the choices we did, why, one thing, for instance, would be like, why did we say we were going to go long term for Ruby, and then after one split, after half a year, we're choosing to get rid of him, right? And I would say that one thing that's really, really impressed me working with Arnau and working with Alva is how well they understand esports, right? Like if I've been working on a different team, for instance, they would go and say like, what the fuck are you doing? How can you possibly make this? But they understand that when you need to take a risk, and sometimes you need to give space for a project to kind of develop, right, in a certain way. And there's different types of projects you can have, right? Like to give an example for this, I talked about a Heretics team that maybe had Blue Razor in instead of Yankos, and what a Heretics team with Yankos will look like, right? Which are 2 very, very different projects and require a different shift in focus for the project. And I would say that they understand those things because they've worked in esports for a long time. And I would say that it's been very impressive, working with people who understand esports and who've been in esports for a long time. It's light years different to maybe some of the orgs that I've worked in the past, where people in senior management roles maybe came from a business background or came from a sports background or something like this. Whereas I think in Heretics you have people that built their careers in esports and understand esports really, really well. And I think that long term for Heretics, let's say Heretics are completely awful for the next like however long, and I'm not on Heretics anymore because I'm fired. I think Heretics long term, with those people there, will be successful. Hopefully I'll be a part of it, but if I'm not, like I'm sure that this all will be successful long time in the future. I think it's also important that they were willing to build rather than just come in and try to buy success, right? And I think that is going to put them in a stronger fundamental position in 2 to 3 years, right? Rather than if they just come in and splash the cash, right from the first split. That's what I would say.
That's great to hear, to be honest.
Yeah.
We are curious about what times do you work with when you're working with the team. How does a normal day inside the org function, or and also if you can see which player sleeps in the most.
Sleeps in the most. Well, I could. Okay, so normally I'll get up early. Depends what time LPL starts. Actually, I said that I didn't watch LCK. The reason why I don't watch LCK is because I'm watching LPL. So normally I'll get my strategic coach. I'll get my strategic coach to watch LCK, and I will watch LPL, right? And then I will highlight the LPL games for them to watch, and they'll highlight the LCK games for me to watch because even when LCK was the best league in the world, I still prefer to watch LPL because obviously I know a lot of the players and a lot of the staff that work in LPL, so it's more fun, right, for me to watch.
Yeah.
So I would say that we get up early, to watch LPL. Players come into the office around 11:45. Flacken is normally there at 9:30, sometimes 9. So he's there before me. And then I would say the players come in. They arrive around 11:30, 11:45. I would say Samox, Yankos, Video, and come in together from the gaming house because they live together. Mercer comes in separately. He lives off site. And then from 11:45 to 12, we'll have lunch. Then we'll do a team meeting, and then we scrim obviously from 1 to 4, and then 5 to 8. Then players will have one-to-ones. We'll eat dinner. We'll do some one-to-ones. There's a lot more one-to-ones during the course of the day. Remember when I was saying that like after every review, there's normally 5 to 10 minutes of one-to-one time. But then maybe there'll be a bit of a summary at the end of the day where we talk about individual goals with players. So different people have different responsibilities. So my responsibility would be Evie. Chris's responsibility would be Yankos and Vitya, and Samix would be Bolek. And then I think players will go home in the evening. I normally get home around 9 o'clock. I will watch the LVP scrims for the next 3 or 4 hours because we have the replays of our scrims. So I'll basically watch them for 3 or 4 hours. I'll take some notes and send them to individual players, or to Naru, or to Alvan, depends on what the notes are. And then I'll do a little bit of watching from other regions, games that I'm catching up on, and then it's bed and repeat that. But I think that's kind of the schedule for the day. It's not like anything special. The only thing I would say is that I really hate the 1 to 4, 5 to 8 system because it gives you no flexibility. So in NA, for instance, we had like a 12 to 5 scrims, or 1 to 6. I can't remember exactly what it was. But if we wanted, we could do evening blocks, and we would do evening blocks as well, right? Twice a week. But I think in LEC, there's no chance. I think also there's only 3 days of scrims a week. So again, for the talent development thing, like trying to develop anything when you have 3 days of scrims is awful. Like it's really awful because the way that your scrim week works is first day you analyze your mistakes from the week. Second day you like test new scrims, new picks that you want to pick on the weekend. And third day you have to prep draft for the weekend, right? Like third day, the Friday is coach's day, right? Like it's when I get to experiment with drafts, and players just have to do whatever I say, right? Like it's a fine day for testing draft. You want to test your Rengar jungle tested on Wednesday, Thursday, but like on Friday, just do what I say, just please, because we have 3 drafts to prep for the weekend. But there's no time for development in that system. And I think it's really interesting because we saw 6 teams take 1 month boot camps before this season, which was really, really interesting. Like Heretics, we've been scrimming for 3.5 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and we were not the first teams to scrim, but we were close. I think. But I would say that most teams have been scrimming for 4 weeks because they realize that there's no time in the season. For your watchers who maybe don't know, normally it would be a 2-week, 2.5 week. Back when I was in Europe in 2020, it would be 2 weeks to 2.5 weeks preseason bootcamp. But now I think almost every team, except G2 and Mad and 2 other teams who I'm not going to name and shame, did 4-week bootcamps, which was interesting.
Okay, I have one more question that it's like every Heretics fan since these 2 years of LoL have been asking, because we have a lot of like I don't know how to say it. I mean, we have a very strong connection to Swairo, and like a lot of people wanted to see him in LEC. What's your opinion on Swairo, and what do you think the future brings to him? Do you think he can reach LEC in maybe Heretics on other team?
First things, I would say Zwairo, if he was in LEC right now, his team fighting is really, really good. He's a very, very impressive team fighter. And I would say if he was in LEC right now, he would be a top 5 team fighter in the league. I just want to be really clear on that. I think he has some weaknesses in his game. Sometimes he gets caught in side lane when he shouldn't. Sometimes, how he works with his jungler is not perfect. It's not bad, but I think that if he went into LEC right now, he wouldn't be the worst mid laner in the league. And I think he would be a very solid player, and his team fighting would be right up there. So then the question you might rightfully want to ask is, okay, and to be clear, like with Jack, Zwairo gets 1-to-1s with LEC coaches like every single week, right? And I mean, any player on the LVP team that wants them will get them. But I would say that Zwairo, more than anyone in LVP, wants those 1-to-1s. He gets multiple a week. He gets information from Seal. Seal is his mid lane position coach, so we'll work with him the most. He gets stuff from me. He gets stuff through Naru, because watch the games as well, and we get feedback from the coaches. And I would say that he is somebody who will definitely play in LEC in 2024, right? Like he's obviously good enough. He's one of the top mid laners in Europe. He will get his shot, right? Whether that's on Heretics or another team is up for discussion, but he's good enough. So why did we not promote him immediately, right? That's a fair question to ask. I think the first thing is there's no chance to develop, right? Like, obviously, he's not going to come in and he's not going to destroy the entire league right at the start, right? Because no rookie is going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're literally Caps, right? And even Caps was pretty rough. Again, Heretics, we're in a really rough situation for development because our season, if we don't do well in the first 3 weeks, we're not going to have any more season, right? There's going to be no more season. Everyone's going to be on break. So that makes development really, really difficult. Secondly, we wanted to make sure going into this split that I want to say this in the nicest way. So we have Jankos now. Jankos is the best jungler in the league right now. We want to make sure that he has the best opportunity to go to Worlds whilst we have this window now where he is playing at such a high level, right? And we want to go and push to go to Worlds as aggressively as we can right now. And I think this is why it wasn't like the right moment for Zwairo to work. And obviously, what I would say is that this is when you have these pieces on your roster, you have to make certain decisions about what our strategy is going to be. And again, I just want to say that this is not something that Jankos is pushing for. This is something that we recognize. If we make these changes, we have the chance to go to Worlds. We have the option to pick up to pick up VTO right now, we have the option to promote Flackett, who's playing at like an exceptional level. So we push now for Worlds, and then we do development through the LVP team. If there was a 9-week summer split, like in previous years, maybe some of those decisions would be different. But in the current LEC format, this is the only option we have. Like if you want to develop somebody, you can't promote them in the middle of the year. You have to promote them at the start of the year. And that's what I would say. That's what I would say for Zwaru. But again, like I said, I'm certain Zwaru will have LEC offers in next offseason. And I'm certain you're going to see him in the LEC, you know, if not in 2024, then in 2025. There's no, like, somebody with his team fighting skill. Like, you can coach laning, you can coach mechanics to an extent, but team fighting is really, really hard to coach. Like, spotting opportunities and spotting risk assessment and how quickly you process information within a team fight. Those are things which are incredibly difficult to coach. And I would say Zwaru's strengths are the areas that are hardest to coach, and his weaknesses are the areas that are easiest to coach. So I think that's what will make him appeal to a lot of LEC scouts. That's what I'd say. Sorry.
You worked with the team during EMEA Masters, right? With the LVP team. What went wrong in EMEA Masters? What was the problem, the mistake?
So,
in your opinion, of course.
Let me think. Sorry, I have to think very carefully about this. So there basically EU Masters was going well until the Gamers Origin series. Between the Gamers Origin series and the Unicorns USE series, the team didn't scrim. Or they scrimmed like 6 games, right, in 5 days. There are various reasons why it wasn't possible to scrim. And it was, you know, like I think the team, that's partly because the team was very exhausted and suffering from burnout. That was partly due to sickness. That was partly due to other factors. But I would say that the way to judge Heretics' true level is up to that Gamers Origin series, because the prep between Gamers Origin and the USC series was awful. And the fact that we managed to like not embarrass ourselves and go 3-0 is a testament to how strong the team was. But what I would say is, yeah, that's what I would say about it. I would say that Istanbul, that our prep going into the Unicorn series was not there because of our lack of scrim time due to various factors. And I would say that that Heretics, as the LVP Heretics, is a team that really benefits from prep. So Istanbul Wildcats, like, were maybe the team that was the least prep for. But if there had been a rematch between Heretics and Istanbul Wildcats in the finals of EU Masters, maybe because all of those things don't happen before the USC series, I think it would have been a very different result, because there would be a lot more data on them. That's what I would say about that. So I think the team was strong. I mean, they did well, right? You know, semifinals. The fact that semifinals at EU Masters is a disappointment is kind of sad. But I would say that it was. Heretics have been really, really unlucky with illness. That's what I would say. Like both LEC and LVP.
But I think the fact that people think that we didn't do it very well, it's because I think it was the sensations during the game. Like, we could have won the game against Unicorn Sexy Editions like so hard, and like people got mad about that. And also the expectation on this roster also with Blackett that came from LEC, and literally destroyed LVP. Like, he was MVP every single game. Like, it was insane. Like, the expectations from the fans were like, okay, we're gonna win everything again, and it ended up on losing the final. That obviously you go to a final, and this is what I say every time. Like, it doesn't matter what you do in the league. The final is completely different. Like, it's a match that you're fighting for the title, and getting to the final is just a good result, even if you lose it, right? But you know, like, we lost like 3-0, and then we go to the EMEA Masters and it was the same. Like, it was not the best feeling, but obviously are good results, right? So,
I mean, what I would say from that final is to remember that firstly, we haven't played in front of a large crowd like that for a long time because of lockdown. Secondly, also remember for Marlon, he's a rookie, right? He's really young,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
18. That was the first time he played in that kind of a series, and Movie Star played to like camp bot to shit, right? So what I would say for the future, it sounds like I'm just blaming Marlon for the series, but the reason why I mentioned Marlon so much is because the same thing happened in EU Masters, and he smurfed the entire series, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I think if that series, the Movie Star Rider series, happened again, like it happened next week, you would see it very, very different. Now, what I would say about the LVP team right now is sometimes when you've played lots of big games and you have how should I say this? You look forward to certain games a lot more than other games, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the excitement and the focus when you're playing against Movie Star or when you're playing against Giants is slightly different to when you're playing against UCAM, and maybe we should respect UCAM a little bit more than we did. But I would say that this is a expect this team to do really, really well, and obviously expect Jack to Jack is a better player now than he was last split. Sorry, last year when Heretics won EU Masters. And sure, EU Masters is more competitive now that Turkey's in it. But I think that the expectations for this team should be very similar to what they've been in previous splits. And yeah, that's what I would say for that. I mean, I think that I think that basically the situations behind the scenes were very, very unfortunate going into the Unicorn series. It felt like it wasn't it almost felt like it wasn't fair, right? But I'm not saying Unicorns did anything bad. It felt really unfair as a Heretics coach.
I think we're gonna end up doing really well, but we have to show more respect to Wazones and UCAM and those teams, bro. Because we literally go there like we don't give a fuck. Ivo pushing along like I mean, it was just a shit show. I mean, everyone is mad about that. But I mean, I'm laughing right now, but I cannot understand it. But we are living in a part. We're not touching this topic right now.
I would say here's how I know. Here's the way I would phrase it to Heretics fans. After the group, so I can't pronounce it very well. The first loss, the Gusones loss. Is that how I pronounce? After that game, so we were celebrating after we won the first two games. After that game, everyone came back and they were just silent, and they all went back into their rooms and just grinded solo because they were supposed to go out to first week back, go and have a celebratory dinner, and nobody, they all just grinded solo queue. They were just like, okay, right, I can't believe it. We're so embarrassed. We're gonna go back and we're just gonna grind solo queue for 5 or 6 hours. And everyone was playing solo queue late into the night on that day. So I think that although it's a little bit copian to say, I think that they cared after the game. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
That connects with a question I had, both about the LEC team and the LVP team, which is how is the mood within the team, particularly when they started losing or the games went a little bit rough. We lost some games that we had an advantage in the early game and all that. How did that affect the mood of the team? Did any players work to keep the hopes up of the team, to keep the mood up?
Okay, so I think people reacted to this in different ways. I think that the way that Jankos approached it, so I think the way, let's talk about the different way that our two veterans approached it, because I think it will explain a lot about our season. So the way I think Jankos approached it was, okay, these things are rough, so I need to carry harder. We need to stomp the game harder, and I need to play more for early game and put myself in a position to carry. I think Evie's response was, I am a veteran on this team. I need to sacrifice more and more and more, right? So basically, I think Jankos' approach was maybe better on the team that we had last split. I think Evie's approach, Evie has never been a Gragas player. He's never been a Scion player, right? But his approach was, if we're really, really struggling, I need to sacrifice more and more and more for the team. And he kept sacrificing more and more. And I think he sacrificed maybe a little bit too much. In situations. So maybe we shouldn't have picked Gragas in certain situations. Maybe we shouldn't have picked Scion in certain situations. Because Evie's historically in his career he's been a bruiser player, right? He's been an Urgot player or an Aatrox player, and Cassante is perfect for him, right? Because Cassante is a tank bruiser, right? It's literally what he wants to do in a team. So I would say it affected the mood a little bit, but I think it was just everything felt very rushed. I would say in Spring Split because already we're behind the curve because we did worse than we thought we were going to do in winter. We didn't get to scrim before the season started, or not proper scrims. You know, we'd have like half days, but I cannot stress to you, like we would do scrims where Ruby would be at home, and after 2 scrims, he couldn't talk anymore. It was just like our comms were like him coughing really, really loudly because he had really bad cough. And we would have to end scrims early and things like this again. Not Ruby's fault. It's just sucks. It's just how it is. But we were always playing catch up, and we always felt that there wasn't time. There was just never time. And I think that's what stressed people out because there was expectations. Because obviously Jankos was playing incredibly well, so we had expectations. But it's like you have a final exam. You don't feel you've prepped enough for the final exam, and you know it's coming every single day. Your finals are coming soon. And we showed some good performances, but you know it was very unfortunate. I mean, we were close in that series in the tiebreaker against Mad Lions. We were close, and Mad Lions ended up winning the split. So you know, maybe in another world we win that tiebreaker.
Heretics was the second best team in LEC.
Yeah.
Really?
In my books, Heretics was the second best team because we should have won that.
Of course. But you know, we didn't. I wish that the split was longer. That's what I would like. It just, yeah, that's what I would say. So I think that this time we made sure that we've given ourselves enough time, and I feel that if we had to play, if we took the last 4 weeks, we've had 3 days off. And that's not because coaching staff are forcing the players. So today is a day off, and the players want to scrim today. And I basically told them, you are going home and like do anything else. Like just have a day off and recover so that you're fresh for LEC. But these guys, everyone on this team has something to prove. And they want to scrim all the time. They want to play all the time. And I think my challenge on this team, or our challenge as a coaching staff on this team, is, you know, if you're going to play 100 games of solo queue a week, and you are Flacket, Jankos, or VTO, who play like insane numbers of solo queue, make sure that you are not just doom playing. You know, like you've lost the game, so you need to play another 3 games. You know, you can't finish on a loss. You have to finish on a win. You know, make sure that if you're going to play 100 games a week, that you're getting something productive out of it. Because I think that the danger on this team is that we're going to overwork ourselves, and part of our responsibility as a coaching staff is making sure that we are channeling this desire to win in a constructive way. And I would say that, again, this is probably the hardest working team that I've ever been a part of, outside of China, right? Like they literally will go home, they will grind Flacket again. First guy in the office, like plays 2 games of solo queue before anyone else is even awake, including coaching staff, and you know, goes to sleep late at night, and he really, really wants to win. And you know, the G2 game, when Flacket and Jankos come back and play against G2, that will be a banger. That's in week 3. And we'll see how things go. But all I would say is expect this team to start strong. We haven't scrimmed every team in the league, but from the games that I've seen, this is going to be a very fun season, and this is a much stronger scrim team than the team that we had last week. That's what I would say.
I love to hear that. Okay, so we finished with the heretics block. I mean, I think we have 15 minutes because Sky have to leave to do an exam. So and we don't want to retain you. We're just doing it this in a rush. We have 15 minutes. I want to ask, just for ending, some things about general League of Legends. Like, what's your
before
ambitions?
that, I have one small thing.
Okay,
I want Peter Dan, if you can, like, what do you expect from the team on this split? Like, what position do you think it's realistic, optimistic, and pessimistic, more or less?
That's a hard one.
I mean,
top 3, like top 3 or nothing. right? Like, I mean, like, let's be clear. Like, if we're making decisions like promoting VTO of Zwiru, if we're making decisions like going to make a push, anything below top 3 is unacceptable. And I think we should be assessed with that in mind. It would be very sad to come 4th place and then not have enough championship points to play in the championship. That's what I would say. But the pessimistic 6th, like 5th or 6th, missing out on top 4. If we are 9th or 10th this split, then I will have questions to answer. But what I would say is that this is. I'm not saying that we should expect to come top 3, but I would say that the goal is to make sure that we put ourselves in a position where we can compete for the championship. Championship is in the top 6, to go towards. And to do that, we need to come 3rd, right?
You will say it's realistic to expect the team to be top 3 or even champions? Would you say that's realistic?
So I don't say champions, I say championship. The championship. So I would say I would say an optimistic, I would say an expected result, if I had to say, and like where this team should expect to be on the talent of the players that we have, this should be a 3 to 5 roster at worst. Optimistic, you can say top 2. Pessimistic, like 6 to 7. I don't know, but I would say that top 3 is what we should aim for. And why does top 3 matter so much? Top 3 is what we need to get the championship points to qualify for the championship, the finals, the LEC finals, whatever they called it. I think it's called the LEC championship, which is super, super annoying. But if we want to go to Worlds, we have to come top 3 this week. And this roster, we're putting in the work and we are putting in the players to give us the highest chance of making that a reality.
I can tell you everyone is very excited after it.
Everyone is literally jumping out of the window right now. Like, I'm gonna move on to more general league part. Just a few questions, just 2 or 3 and we're done. Is it EU doomed, as it seems? Like, do you think we cannot compete with Korea and China? Or do you think there's a hope? Or what do you think we have to do or to improve to compete with China and Korea in Worlds?
Every time Worlds happens in NA or EU, it's a massive disadvantage for the NA and EU teams. That's what I would say, because you can't boot camp early because the teams you really want to scrim against are the Chinese and the Korean teams. And as a result, JDG arrive early and then stomp you into the floor, right? Because you have no chance to scrim them. And I think this happened at Worlds and this happened at MSI because Worlds was in NA and MSI was in Europe. This year, Worlds is in Korea, which means that if you are an LEC team going to Worlds, you're going to show up 4 weeks early, 3 weeks early, and you are going to scrim all the Korean teams and Chinese teams you possibly can. So I think you would expect better results this year than in the past. Actually, every single time Worlds is in NA or EU, that's really scary for Western teams. That's what I would say to that.
Okay, perfect. And for ending, do you have a message? Well, I think Sky want to ask one thing about humanoid, because it's really.
I actually wanted to ask. There is a certain idea in Spain that some coaches are there just because they are good friends of the players and not because they are actually good coaches, and that's one of the main differences between Eastern teams and Western teams. The fact that Eastern coaches are more respected, they are better, and they are there because they know their job. Well, here it's more of being friends of the correct people. Do you think that's right? That's not right? Do you think we have a problem with coaches in the West?
Hard for me to judge, right? Because I'll be honest, I don't know how different teams recruit their coaches. Like, all I know is that the way that I've always done it is I just do an open application process, and then whoever does best in the open application, like on EG, I had 30 people in my first year and 100 people in my second year. On Heretics, I signed to Heretics quite late in the off season, so I didn't have time to do a full open application process. But if a coaching position comes open in Heretics, it will just be open application, right? So it will be like the first 150 people or like 300 people. Like on EG, we had to stop applications at 300 because too many people applied, right? But we'll just interview like everyone that we possibly can. And I do agree that there's a lot of nepotism in the scene, but the way that I've done it, it's just always open application, right? So hard for me to judge. Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say also that don't assume that there's no nepotism in China or Korea. That's all I'm gonna
Yeah,
say.
but what it said, for example, here in Europe, it's like, for example, there are a lot of players that say, well, this coach is good. Like, and okay, why is this coach good? Because it's doing whatever you want to do, or it's because mostly coaches are like a pain in the ass, like for players, because if as my vision, you have to tell players what they don't want to hear, and also like making them better, right? So I think there are many coaches in esports in general, not only League of Legends, that they have not that strong personality to lead a group, and they just leave players and they just make players happy, right? And this is what it said in Spain. I think you cannot get. I think you. I also think you cannot say what your full opinion on this, but this is the main point here in Spain.
So I think it depends a lot on coaching style as well, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think I talked about my coaching style, right? My coaching style is very rarely to go and tell a player, you should do this. It's to go and say to a player, here's 3 ways that like other players do it, or 4 ways that other players do it. Let's have a discussion, right? And if I could see how like a certain type of player may think that this is just me being useless, right? It's just me doing an analyst job, right? Instead of a coach job.
Yeah.
So also I can see that if you were a coach with a top-down thing and you're saying to your player, do this, do this, do this, do this, and the player really disagrees with you, then they may like grow to hate you very quickly, right? So it often, I think there are good coaches for certain types of players, but you need a baseline of knowledge. And sometimes it's very hard for a new coach to develop a baseline of knowledge without working with good pro players, right? Like, again, I mentioned the impact thing. Like, I think that I'm a better coach because I work with Impact. I like to think that Impact is a better player because he worked with me, but maybe he just thinks I'm useless, right? But the point is that like you being able to learn from a large number of situations is important, and I think it's a two-way street. And I think that sometimes it's difficult for coaches to do that. So that's first thing I say. Second thing I would say is that having a coach who is friends with the player is a good thing. Just having lots of coaches who understand the game is not always the best thing if none of them have good relationship with your players, right? So I think that you need in a coaching staff a number of people to fill a number of different roles, and it's up to the GM to make sure that you have all of those roles filled in your team. You need some just happiness. Like having happiness in your team is important.
Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't have to come from the players. I mean, obviously, there was the whole Niski and Leo thing, which I'm not going to go into.
Well, no.
But like sometimes, if all of your players are really miserable, sometimes you need like happy coaches around those types of players. Sometimes, if your players are very happy, you need a coach to go and say, "Why the fuck are you happy? Like, go and focus on the game," right? So it's a balance. And I think again, it's hard for me to judge how other teams recruit coaches. All I can talk for is my process. And I mean, again, when Heretics do their open application process, there will be a 30-minute, like, people will send in their things. There will be a 30-minute, like, screening interview. There will be like a 1 hour, like coaching interview. And then there will be a 1 hour to 1.5 hour case study interview, right? So it's like a minimum of 2.5 to 3 hours. And it's exhausting and it's very tiring, but it's important to make sure the right people get recruited, right? So that's just how I've done things in the past. So I can say that I don't know how it will work on other teams, but on Heretics, it's not going to work like that.
Okay. Really interesting point. Okay, if for finishing now, because we don't want to have you here 3 hours. Like, we talked almost about everything. The community and the Heretics fans want to know. I just want you to send a message for the fans, and like I do this with every interview. Like, what brings the future, and how what our reason to be hyped by with the team.
Okay, so I think good reason to be hyped. Jankos and Flackhead back together. I think Flackhead watching this split for how to see the growth that Flackhead has had as a player since he's last been in LEC will be very exciting. I would say that being able to watch Jankos in a team now where he can come and play the tanks and not have to be primary carry and do the thing that he's best at will be exciting. I would say for Evie, being able to see Evie now when he's playing properly for himself and not sacrificing everything for his team should be exciting. Seeing Vincent, who has a lot of who has a lot of things to prove after the Excel thing, being back in, Heretics have a lot of the staff from the old Misfits, so he knows a lot of people here. Proving the doubters wrong will be exciting. Mercer, I wish I had an exciting storyline for him, but Mercer and Flacker together should be more than enough of an exciting storyline. Wait until the first game when they go and play against Executive and DOS. That's what I will say. I would say that recognize that from the fan side, often the results were not very good last split. Often it's very hard to be positive in a situation like this. All I say is to give the players support. These guys have been literally working for 3.5 weeks straight with basically no break, with like 3 days off, like in the last 3.5 weeks, grinding nonstop in order to put on a good performance. And I just hope that you can give the players the support, and also hopefully that we can put on a performance which is worthy of representing Heretics, because I think at times last split we kind of failed in that regard, and a lot of self-reflection from the players, from the coaches, has happened in this off-season, and we think we've got a good formula for success this split. All I would say is, if things are going well, that's really, really good. If things are going badly, don't hold the players accountable, hold the coaching staff accountable, right? Because at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to put forward the result, and it's the players' responsibility to play to the best of their level, right? So that's what I say. Hold me accountable, hold our coaching staff accountable, but we think we have something here which can do really, really well. And we'll see how, obviously you can never predict everything. There can be major patch changes, there can be meta reads that are completely off. But for what I've seen right now, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And hopefully that gives you something to look forward to this split. So all Heretics.
Let's see. Let's see what's coming. So Peter, I want to say I'm very thankful for you coming here. Like, it was an amazing talk. I think it is the best interview we've done already, because we talked about anything. With you just said everything you had to say, and it was really, really, really good. So thank you so much. Sky, if you want to say something.
Yeah, I've talked with Peter in the past, and he knows I'm a very big fan of all his work. I've been following him for many years. You're actually the only reason I have ever followed LCS actively, just because I wanted to see what you did with Evil Geniuses and see you find talent there and all that. So a million thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk with you, to have this interview, to do this. I'm a very big fan. I'm sure this split won't disappoint. I'm sure you will get. Bring it home. We want the World Trophy here.
Bring it
in
home.
Spain. So
bring it home. Bring it to
Madrid.
Madrid.
I can tell you, everyone, all the fans, everyone loves you. We all think you are a great guy, a great coach. There have been calls in the chat to give you a permanent contract in Heretics and get you here forever, not let you go. So a million thanks, and let's hope it all goes well. Thanks for all your hard work.
Well, I mean, thanks for your kind words. Thanks for inviting me on to be able to talk about the next split. And like obviously we'll try our best to get the World's Trophy back to Europe. If hopefully on the Rift, but if it's not on the Rift, I hear they keep the World's Trophy in an unlocked cabinet somewhere. So maybe we can find another way to bring it home to Europe.
So I'm ending this. I'm gonna end it in Spanish. Gracias por todos los que habéis estado aquí, por un día más la entrevista. Hemos sido casi 45 personas, he visto en un momento, y ya a esta hora, que no suele haber mucha gente, o sea que muchas gracias a todos y seguiremos haciendo este content para vosotros. Así que, bye.